Welcome back to Gridiron Glory, the podcast where we relive the most unforgettable moments in football history. I'm your host, Jake.
And I'm Maria, and today we're turning our attention to a city synonymous with both celebration and Super Bowl history, New Orleans.
That's right, Maria. New Orleans is gearing up for its record-tying 11th Super Bowl, and that got us thinking, what are the moments that have truly defined the Super Bowl experience in the Big Easy?
It's a great question, Jake, because it's not just about the number of games. It's about the legacy, the unforgettable plays, and the cultural tapestry that New Orleans brings to the Super Bowl. Let's start at the beginning, back in 1970.
Super Bowl IV in 1970 at Tulane Stadium is where it all began for New Orleans. It was a historic game, the last one before the AFL and NFL merger, and it saw the Kansas City Chiefs defeat the Minnesota Vikings. It wasn't just a game, it was a cultural moment. Do you recall the halftime show?
How could anyone forget? It was a vibrant showcase of New Orleans, with music from the Onward and Olympia brass bands. It really set the tone for what a Super Bowl in New Orleans could be, a collision of sports and culture. Then, just a couple of years later, we had another classic at Tulane Stadium.
Yes, Super Bowl VI in 1972, where the Dallas Cowboys beat the Miami Dolphins. This was a landmark win for the Cowboys, their first Super Bowl victory, with Roger Staubach named MVP. I understand the halftime show was also pretty special too.
It was a beautiful tribute to Louis Armstrong, the legendary New Orleans jazz musician who had recently passed away. It was a very poignant moment, blending the energy of the Super Bowl with the city's deep musical roots. It showed the Super Bowl could be much more than just football, a chance to honor the city's icons. And then we have another Super Bowl at Tulane Stadium.
In 1975, the Pittsburgh Steelers defeated the Minnesota Vikings. And while that game may not have had the cultural significance of the previous ones, it did launch the Steelers' dynasty, with Franco Harris earning the MVP title. So after those early years at Tulane, the Super Bowl moved into its new home.
The Superdome really changed the game, didn't it? It's such an iconic venue. The next big moment in New Orleans, at least for me, has to be Super Bowl XV in 1981. The Oakland Raiders took down the Philadelphia Eagles. It was 5 days after the Iran hostage crisis ended. A truly unique time to host the Super Bowl.
Absolutely, that added an extra layer of emotion to the event. And it was also quite a performance by the Raiders. Linebacker Rod Martin's 3 interceptions are certainly a highlight of Super Bowl history. And who could forget the halftime show with Helen O'Connell and the Southern University Marching Band?
Absolutely a great show, with some old-school music. I also think of the 90s Super Bowls as well.
There were some great games, but perhaps the most memorable from recent history has to be Super Bowl in 2002. It was the first Super Bowl held after the 9/11 attacks. The New England Patriots beat the St. Louis Rams, and that game is significant for so many reasons.
You're right, Jake. That game was so important for so many reasons. It was a sign of recovery and resilience. It was also the beginning of the Patriots dynasty, their first of 6 Super Bowl titles. And it was won on the back of a game-winning field goal from Adam Vinatieri. I get chills just thinking about it.
It really was a classic. But for me, nothing beats Super Bowl in 2013, the Baltimore Ravens versus the San Francisco 49ers.
The Harbaugh Bowl, with the two brothers coaching against each other. That's one of the more fascinating Super Bowl storylines, but that game had so much more to offer than just the coaching rivalry. That game also had the infamous blackout that lasted for over 30 minutes.
That blackout was surreal. The lights went out and everything went quiet. It's hard to imagine something like that happening at a Super Bowl. But despite the interruption, the game was an instant classic, right down to the wire. There was so much back and forth action, and when all was said and done, the Ravens were victorious. It is probably one of the most fascinating Super Bowls of all time, let alone those played in New Orleans.
It truly is. And when we think about New Orleans, it's not just about the individual games. It's about the recurring themes, the sense of celebration, and the city's unique spirit. New Orleans is always a great location to host because of the city's rich music and entertainment culture, and of course, its southern hospitality.
I agree. It's a city that has provided the backdrop for some of the most iconic moments in Super Bowl history. We've seen so many great players hoist the Vince Lombardi Trophy in New Orleans, from Staubach to Bradshaw, Favre to Brady. And it isn't just the quarterback position. We have seen players like the Fridge flatten the Pats.
And let's not forget the halftime performances. From tributes to jazz legends like Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington to high-energy shows from Beyoncé and U2, New Orleans has always provided a great setting for the halftime shows too. New Orleans is always going to be a great location because the combined debauchery and city grid could provide the best people watching and communal experience.
It's clear New Orleans is more than just a host city. It's an integral part of the Super Bowl story. It's a place where the spirit of the game merges with a unique cultural vibe. The city is built to host large events and to give the fans an unforgettable experience.
Absolutely, Jake. New Orleans has earned its place as a quintessential Super Bowl location. It has a unique ability to blend the thrill of the game with the joy of celebration, making it so much more than just a football game. Each Super Bowl in New Orleans adds to the tapestry of that story.
I couldn't agree more, Maria. It's a city that knows how to throw a party, and it knows how to host a Super Bowl. It is going to be great seeing the game return to New Orleans, and I can't wait to see what new moments they will bring to life.
Me neither, Jake. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us on Gridiron Glory, where we celebrated the greatest Super Bowl moments in New Orleans.